Because with pistachio, if you already do the work for me, then it feels like it's very like fast food. But if I have to break the shell, then I'm somewhat like hunting, right? Like don't
Yeah,
serve me the steak. Let me hunt for the steak
yeah.
and then
It
cook
brings
it
us
up. That's
back to
pistachio.
like, our ancestors and
Yeah.
stuff back in that. So
That's my level of
Um,
testosterone right there, ripping off the shells of a
yeah.
pistachio, holding it high so that the other pistachios can see the level of
Like
damage I did to his family member.
I earned this nut.
Like Predator. you wear you wear the mask of fucking pistachio shells.
You just see the bodies of shells like on your plate or the table, just all lying in there. It
There
was
we
like
go,
another
man.
victory.
Another victory. So on that note, welcome back to Not a Strong Start, a podcast by filmmakers who talk movies, television, and build displays of shells of our nuts. I'm your host. So good I won it twice.
I'm your host, who does not have a name here because I was too busy talking about nuts. Uh,
When isn't he?
okay, and I'm your second helping. It was either that or a double take. Second helping sounded more
It does.
food-like.
Okay, I want to know why every time we see the double take, like you're holding two sacks of like rice bags. When you said
What?
second helping, why? What
Second.
are
Um,
you holding?
is this how people carry rice bags?
I think so, right? You can you kind of
they got a
film and then
bit
sometimes
heavy.
you
If
kind of
you're
like push
carrying
them.
two, you can use your shoulders for like
Yeah.
Yeah.
leverage.
Okay. Well, because when I think about that, when I do, because when I see like sacks of rice, I'm like, oh damn.
Right? Don't you like picking up the
Get you.
sack and just kind of like bouncing and you kind of feel it
Oh
in
yeah.
the
Oh, when
fingers?
you feel it, it's like, oh
Hmm.
yeah, I love that. I love
Almost
feeling those sacks like this. Like,
Yeah,
almost like you're looking for a growth, like a
yeah.
tumor growth.
yeah.
You're like, oh, okay. Well, now let's try the long grain.
It doesn't feel very long. Ooh, this one feels very long. All right, that's the one I'm taking.
No, I'm for the wild rice. The wild rice is what I want. Doesn't
You
matter if
ever
it's
see
long
how it's
grain,
like,
short grain, wild rice.
they had like COVID and stuff. Everyone's wearing masks and look out for that. You still saw people over at the avocados still squeezing them, trying to see if they
Yeah.
were ripe, just spreading
You
germs all
have
over the place.
to.
So, in case you guys haven't been able to tell, this week's episode is about movies that you need to see twice that are better on the second viewing. As by our previous discussion that we had in this episode, it would kind of lead us up to that, right? You would imagine that's what we're talking about. So, these are movies that maybe the first time you watched it, maybe you really liked it. And maybe when you watch the second time, you're like, whoa, I got way more out of this. Or maybe you didn't really like it the first time. And you're like, it's okay. But then you kept hearing it hyped. So you go back and you rewatch it a couple of times. You're like, okay, this is a lot better than I thought. So before I ask for you guys' opinion on that, we're going to hit you with the current event.
As we all know here, and we got very excited about,
Hmm.
we're gonna get 28 years later is coming down the road. With that being said, 28 days later,
Hmm.
um, which at some point I think was owned by Disney or something. It was like on Hulu is where they had
Mm.
it, but the rights of that have now gone to Sony because in part of their deal, getting the rights to have the 28 years later, 28 days later came along. So they took it off of Hulu. That means at this point in time, 28 days later, it's not streaming anywhere. And there actually is no Blu-rays, no new Blu-rays out there for it. So if you don't already own it, it's very hard to get 28 days later at this point in time. And part of the reason too is that movie was made during the very beginning stages of some of the digital productions that we have now, which is why it looks the way it does. Uh, and it's something that it's not so easy to bring up to 1080p or not even talk about 4K. So it's not something that's being reproduced when it comes to these Blu-rays, making it very hard to see at this point in time. What are you guys' thoughts on that? We'll start with you, Dan.
I just read today too that I think Best Buy was the Best Buy that they're going to stop selling their
They
physical.
already started.
Yeah, they already
Yeah.
started
We
it.
don't have any here. We don't have any here.
No, so it's crazy because it's like now if you can't obtain these things, this is where the streaming companies have full, it almost feels like a dictatorship, right? Like they're the gatekeepers. We can't view this now. So it's very limited. You're forced to get certain streaming providers and all that just to be able to watch it. Otherwise, you're just going to go down the road of illegal streaming like that. Unfortunately, that's what you have to do. I try to do as much legal streaming as possible so that way the filmmakers can still get their credits and still get, their residuals. It just sucks that this is the way that we have to go. It's ironic that it's this movie, 28 Days Later, about dystopian zombie apocalypse, and it's about we can't find any more copies of this. So there you go. Ironic.
Mhm.
What about you, Murray?
I have my DVD, not Blu-ray. I have my DVD copy, and I'm gonna hold on tight to that because I love that movie, and I don't want to see it in 4K anyway. I want to, I want the a little more of a grit and grain. It's like when you
Hmm.
listen to music on a record and you get the scratch. It's like it sounds good, and yeah. But
I, I,
yeah, I second everything what Dan said too.
yeah.
Said it so smartly.
I agree that I feel with this movie, the aesthetic, the look of it, it fits this movie. That
Mm,
if they do eventually, which who knows, Sony probably will try, to bring it out to make some extra money when the new movie comes out, get people to buy the original. If they do try to spruce it up a little bit, I feel it's gonna take away from the movie. This is the type of movie where, like Marie said, that grittiness, that imperfection that you get from it visually fits the story in that world.
Getting into our topic, right? Let's get back to the movies that are so twice. What would compel you guys that you guys need to see a second viewing, and why would that alter the way that you viewed it the first time? So, Marie, want to go first?
I mean, it could be something so simple like if my mood was salty while I was watching it the first time, Like if my mood, if I was overtired and I watched it, I'm like, oh, what's the movie's terrible, and watch it next time. Then you're like, actually, now that I'm more awake and vital, it's actually pretty good. Um, Sometimes when they tell you're so focused on the story sometimes when you watch the movie that I like to go back and watch it a second time so I can appreciate all the artistic value and like the filmmaking, the directing, and the sound and the editing. Some movies really require that. And also, I know when with horror movies, especially, I like to always give them a second viewing because usually I'm plugging my ears and closing my eyes, waiting for jump scares, and and if I know when all the jump scares are, then I can go back and actually fully appreciate the movie and without being a little coward, and actually watch it and focus on it to appreciate it more.
For me, there's a few different reasons that can make a movie better the second viewing. One, you can catch some clues that you may have missed in the first viewing of it. You can also see characters in a different way, especially if you know the direction. Especially if there's like sometimes a twist at the end or things like that. When you're viewing it that second time, you you might catch some nonverbal clues from that character, uh, in because you're viewing them in a different way. It also can help you understand some plot elements if you have movies that throw a lot at you. That it might be, a little too much because you're trying to decipher this, then 10 more things get thrown at you. So the second viewing can help with that. It can also help make it more enjoyable because you go into the second viewing with better expectations. We've talked about how movies are not always advertised with what you're actually going to get. So sometimes your viewing experience can be influenced by those false expectations going in,
Mhm.
which can be to the detriment of what the artist created because they created it with a certain vision and it wasn't advertised that way. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think those are the main ones that can make a second viewing uh better for me and help me enjoy a movie that maybe the first time I wasn't fully on board with.
For me, usually when I watch a movie, I have in order to give it like a proper score, I have to watch it a second time. But I'm not including that as part of this discussion. What I really wanted to focus on with these ones for myself is movies that improved or movies that needed a second viewing, right? Because I know they would sometimes mention movies like, let's say, The Sixth Sense, like something that had like a twist ending. But then when you go back, I don't think, in my opinion, those movies don't necessarily require a second viewing because the surprise was in the first viewing. So for me, ones that really did it was ones that they have like layered details, layered characters, layered stories. Sometimes those stuff that as you start to uncover it towards the end, it's like, oh wow, they were this the whole time, or oh wow, that was that. You have to go back and catch certain details that the filmmaker was putting there that you start to understand how much they layered it. Another one was plant and payoffs. So a lot of times they'll set something up, you see the payoff later, but when you go back and you rewatch it, you'll notice how many plants that they planted there. It's like, oh snap, I didn't even realize. An
The
example of
forest
that.
supplants.
Yeah, exactly. But like an example of that was in the movie Back to the Future, right? When you open up on Back to the Future and they're going through all the clocks, already the clock is like the metaphor for time and everything else. But there's one particular clock that has a guy hanging from the long arm, right? That's going on the clock face. When you watch the movie all the way through and you at the end when you see Doc Brown hanging from the clock tower, you wouldn't automatically know, oh, that's from like the opening shot of the movie when they showed us a bunch of clocks. It's only when you go back and you realize, Jesus, they put that right in front of our eyes at the very beginning of the movie, and I didn't even catch that was the climax of the entire movie. So little details like that. So a lot of times it's superb filmmaking. I notice for me, that's what draws me in more is when when I sit back and I watch a movie. I'm just trying to digest as much as possible. And then when I go to, by the end of the movie, I fully understand what the filmmaker's trying to tell me. But for those superb filmmaking skills, I go back and I realize the lighting, the editing, the techniques, like certain film camera movement that they were setting up, like the plant and payoff, but they're doing it from a technical standpoint. Those are the things that I feel like I need to go back and fully appreciate the filmmaking that was involved in that. Because the first one, I'm just watching really more story and characters than anything else. The other one is nuanced acting. So sometimes you get like a phenomenal acting, you go back and you rewatch it and you realize that the non-verbal cues that the actor is doing could just be so phenomenal. But again, the first time you're trying to just absorb the story and you're trying to hang on to it. And then just different views of different characters. There's sometimes where I'll watch a movie, I'm watching it from one point of view. And then when I go back years later, for some reason, I'm in a different place now and I'm seeing it from a different character's point of view. And it completely changes the movie experience for me.
I can see that that happens if you watch something as a kid, as a teenager, as an adult.
Hmm.
You know, your own like life experiences gives you a different perspective, where maybe certain characters who you were relating to or you were rooting for them, you were on their side. Then you watch it as an adult, and it was like this character kind of sucks. I'm on this person's
Yes.
side now.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And that's one of my examples was something that was like that. It was like, whoa, that completely changed. And I had no idea. Very interesting. It also shows a level of maturity of where we're at in our lives, where you were mentally is the fact that this appealed to you. And now that you're older, it's like, whoa, I completely see it from this point of view now. Like that's crazy. Self-reflection.
Yeah, the only
I
thing that doesn't work with is fart jokes. That's good, no matter what age.
Damn
That's
right it is.
timeless.
So good. I
Timeless.
so good. I won it twice.
What are you
I,
gonna say,
I know
Murray?
that when I watch movies, first watch, I'm fully invested with my feelings, and I look at it all from feeling standpoint, and I'm like, how does this relate to life? How would I feel in this situation? So I'm really invested with all my emotions when I watch movies the first time, and I like to remove that for the second view because it's like it's not about you. I want to watch it from like what like the directors and the writers are trying to say. So like if I watch it the first time and I'm so invested emotionally, I like to go in like a second time and remove the emotions and the feelings and be able to see it for what it is at face value instead of me being like, oh, if that was me, I would. So it
You know
helps.
what's funny? I'm kind of the opposite of you. When I watch it, it's more from the technical because me being a writer, I'm watching for pacing and timing and what they're
Mhm.
setting up, and I'm so focused on the story that sometimes it sucks because I can figure out the ending oftentimes in movies because I could tell what
Mhm.
they're setting up. But that's what I'm paying attention to so much is the story, the dialogue, the technical stuff.
Mhm.
Then once I get and understand what the director's trying to do, then when I go back for the second viewing, that's when I feel like, okay, now I know what they're trying to tell me. Let me see how well they did it. And then I can
Mm.
really dial in on that and really get myself involved with the emotions.
Mm. Yeah, no,
I,
it takes feelings first.
I feel like I lie somewhere in the middle, between
Mhm.
you two there, where it's like a mix of both. That first time I'm watching, uh, feeling wise, I'm looking for that psychological aspect of it. Like, what emotion are you going to bring out, and do you like nail it? That's what gives me the immersion of it. Unless I know it's the type of movie that's not what it's meant for. So like I look for that, but it's the technicality of the acting is what's connected to that. So if the acting isn't good, I'm not gonna get that emotional aspect. But if I'm not getting that emotional aspect, I'm not fully immersing into it.
Hmm. Good.
Uh,
So you guys ready to get
Mhm.
into some of our movies?
yeah, let's do it. Let's get into
Perfect.
it.
I'm pretty personally excited about some of these three movies I want to talk about. So I really love this episode topic. I think it's great to go and delve into why these movies are so brilliant and why the second viewing completely enhanced it. So who wants to start us off?
Yeah, I can start. So this was hard for me at first, mainly because if I don't like a movie the first viewing, it's highly unlikely I'm going back for a second viewing, no matter what.
Hmm.
There's
Me
movies
too.
out there that people say like, no, you got to watch it a second time. It's good, and it's so hard for me to go into it because that first time just it didn't do it
Okay.
for me. It wasn't a good experience.
Quick question. Is there one that you can think of off the top of your
No
head?
Country for Old Men.
So you didn't like it the first time, but you did
I
like
did
it.
not like. No,
Wow.
I don't like it. I didn't like it the first time,
Yeah.
and everyone says you need to revisit it. You catch more stuff for a time, but I can't bring myself to watch it a second time because I really did not
Oh, no,
enjoy
no.
it the
I'm
first time.
saying, is there one where you didn't like it the first time? You went back and you did like it, and it was like, okay, that's the rare exception that that works.
There's one on this list.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you won't reveal it yet. How about you, Marie?
Yeah,
If it's not on your list, or is it on your
Mm,
list?
Oh, oh yeah, that's on my list too. The one that
Okay.
I didn't like and then
I just
liked.
have a random one. Like Napoleon Dynamite was one that when I first watched it, I didn't like it. And as I've gone back, I started to like it more and appreciate it more for what it was. So
yeah. I didn't
there are
like
rare
that one.
exceptions.
Never went back.
Yeah. See.
Usually it's like I watch so many movies and there's so many movies. No matter how many movies I watch, there's so many more out there to watch that if something I don't like it the first time, I feel like I'm wasting time going back to it when I can use that time to try to discover something that I may like. So it
See,
makes it
yeah.
harder to go back to it.
I I can believe that. I mean, I agree with that, but to what Marie's point was is sometimes I'm also very aware that it depends what my mood in, how I saw it. If I feel like I didn't give it my proper full attention, maybe I was doing a little bit of work while I was playing, I'm like halfway paying attention. I'm aware of those kind of things, and I'm also aware that sometimes maybe I just didn't get it in the beginning. So sometimes I'm prone to go back and rewatch them to see, okay, maybe I just didn't get it. Now I kind of get it. Let me look it through this prism and see how that looks. So cool.
Mm.
Yeah. I can see that. For this list, I do have one that I did not enjoy the first one. I won't get into that one yet. The other two, they were more movies that I was on the fence after the first watching. There was elements that I liked, but I was just like, oh, wow, like, do I like these movies? And so like I had to give it another try to give a full like judgment of it, and I ended up liking them.
Hmm.
First one that I'll get into is the movie that I know I'm the only one here that likes, and that is Us from Jordan Peele. Okay.
Hmm.
So the premise of this family is on vacation, encounter where what appears to be their evil doppelgangers, who are trying to eliminate them, and it turns out there's doppelgangers for more than just them. That's the basic premise of it. And then after the first movie, I wasn't sure I liked this movie. There were things that I did like on it, but there were story elements that seemed off to me. But there was just enough in it that I'm like, okay, let me give it another go. In the second viewing, it allowed me to catch more context clues throughout the movie. There was a lot of visual foreshadowing that was sprinkled out throughout the movie that I was able to respect for Jordan Peele's like directorial choices and how he did certain things that once you know where the movie is going or a movie ends, it pops out a lot. While during that first viewing, you might not catch it because it seems mundane, but it ends up sticking out a little bit more. So I caught a lot of more of that and a better understanding of the story, why things were happening, why it happened the way it did. So I gained a better appreciation the second time that I watched it, and I even watched it a third time and caught a couple more things that there were directorial choices by Peel that I didn't end up enjoying. So that's why my first choice is Us.
I love Jordan Peele. That's how I kind of felt about the movie Nope. When I watched it the first time, I was like, okay, I really like this. When I went back the second time, I noticed a lot of little details that he put into it. I understand with Us. I actually went back and rewatched it. It might have been my third time, I think, or maybe the second time. I want to say the third time, but I rewatched. I appreciate it a little more, on that third viewing. But yeah, I just really love Get Out and Nope a little more though. So I get it.
No, Us isn't my top Jordan Peele
Yeah,
movie.
I know, but it's
Um,
yeah.
but yeah, but it is something. If I would have left it on that first viewing, I would have really been like teetering on the fence of like, I like this stuff, I didn't like this stuff. Some of those things that I didn't like ended up slowly moving to the other category as I caught more certain little elements from it. Not a flawless movie by any way, but enough moved over to the good side for me to enjoy the movie.
Right?
Hmm. I'm the first one I'm gonna go for is The Witch. When I first watched The Witch, also I want to add that sometimes maybe you won't enjoy a movie because maybe you're watching it with other people who don't enjoy it and they might be very outspoken
That's
about
a
why
big
they don't
one.
like it. And then I want to form my own thoughts about it, and then I'm like, oh, and then sometimes I get in my head, I'm like, well, is it wrong if I like this? Is it really that bad? You know? But then, so I, when I first watched The Witch, didn't like it, but I also was confused if I liked it or not. Um, but first of all, I needed to do a rewatch because I couldn't understand what the heck the dad was saying half the time. Like, I'm really bad with accents, and I'm like, sometimes I have to put subtitles on because I'm like, what are they saying? Especially like even like British accents. I'm like, oh my goodness. But so needed a second watch just for that. But once I was able to just watch it a second time and really focused in it, I saw the artistic value in it. I also removed my emotions from it because there's stuff that happens with children in that movie and babies and I that's like I can't watch movies with stuff like that in it. So, but I knew it was coming. I knew, so I was able to remove my emotions from it and watch it and actually really appreciate all uh the artistic value for it, especially is one of my favorite depictions of the devil in any movie. Not Black Phillip, but when Black Phillip like kind of comes human at the end, and he's like, and you see his hands, he has jewels and everything on. I'm like, whoa, that is just so brilliant. And that's why when I went to watch like The Lighthouse, I was able to be like, oh, okay, I can see, I know how Robert Eggers makes movies. I know what like his choices are, and I was able to appreciate that movie like from the first go because I was like, oh, okay, I know how you do things, and I liked it. But The Witch was a hard one for me to appreciate the first time, but I really like it now.
It's funny. I have not finished that movie. I did
Mm.
two attempts at it,
Oh,
and I stopped and I didn't finish it. But uh, I don't think it's so much about the movie, which is the reason why I haven't ruled out. I definitely plan to revisit it. It was bad timing on both occasions of trying to watch the movie,
mm,
where I had too many distractions, and it just when you have distractions, the movie needs to hit a certain pace to engage you. When you have distractions and the movie runs at a slower pace, where you have to really like get into the atmosphere in order to engage, it doesn't mix. So I
mm.
do know that it was two bad opportunities to try to watch that movie. So I am gonna revisit it. But yeah, both times I didn't finish it.
It introduced us to Anya Taylor-Joy, right? She was good in that.
Mhm.
But I felt the same way when I saw it the first time. It was like, okay, like it was way overhyped for me when I first watched it, and it was very slow paced. And
Mm,
I think I was just that was my fault though for expecting something different in your typical traditional horror movie, and it wasn't. So when I went back and watched it the
Mhm.
second time, I did appreciate it more. So I understand it. The filmmaker is really good and nuanced in the way that he does it. And I just think it's
Mhm.
you have to get used to their style. And
yeah.
sometimes when you just watch a movie, oftentimes we put in what our own expectations are. And if those movies don't meet the criteria, we say it's bad filmmaking when in fact we were a bad viewer. So that's one thing to keep in
Mm,
mind. So that's why I think giving a movie a second viewing is fair to the filmmaker because now your expectations are gone and now you're viewing it, truly viewing it the way that you should be viewing it, which is through the filmmaker's point of view, right? So
Well
one thing to
said.
mm,
keep in mind, yeah. Okay, so I picked three different movies for three different reasons, and it's some of the details of reasons for why I said it about doing a second viewing. So this one was for the acting. So I went with the Joker. The origin story of Joker, a man delving into insanity and mental illness. So it was one of those ones that it was done by the director that did The Hangover. So already weird, right? Comedy director. But when you watch the Joker, when I saw it the first time, I just was blown away about how mature it was, how phenomenal Joaquin Phoenix was in the role, and the acting and the story was so well done. When I went back and watched it the second time, I was just so blown away by Joaquin Phoenix's physical acting performance
Mm,
of the mental illness and how it was painful. Like even his laugh was so painful to him. Like it physically hurt him. I noticed the nuances of his acting in between, so I wasn't so focused on the story anymore. I can just watch the pacing and the timing and him carrying scenes when the camera wasn't really necessarily moving and the pain within his eyes. I just really appreciated his acting so much more with the second viewing. For those, if they've seen it once, go back and watch it a second time. He was so brilliant in that role.
Actually, I enjoyed that in the first viewing, but it did get better for me the second viewing. I think what held it back for me the first viewing, it's me personally. I it as much as I tried, the first viewing I couldn't fully separate um my thoughts on the Joker character and who he's been and all that. And this is a different iteration of it. So that
Mm.
was leaking into my viewing of the
mm.
first movie. So I did enjoy it, but the second viewing, I had done a better job of just completely isolating it to this movie, and I appreciated it a lot more.
Hmm.
I haven't seen it a second time, but I want to. I've always wanted to go back a second time and watch it because
You should.
yeah.
For my second movie, I went with Tenet from Christopher Nolan. Uh, there was quite a few Christopher Nolan movies that I enjoyed in subsequent viewings. But this was the first movie from him that I was on the fence on the first viewing. All the other ones I enjoyed the first viewing, it just only got better. But this one, the premise: a CIA operative tries to stop the end of the world in a world where time is moving forward and backwards simultaneously, to give the simple concept of that. Now, after the first viewing, there was a few plot aspects that I was confused about. This movie throws so much at you. It's not very linear in its presentation in the way it's directed, so you have to piece things together as you're going along and, kind of create a timeline within your own mind to kind of see where everything fits in on top of the whole, kind of like Interstellar, you get into the technical aspects of that world and the way science works there. So there's a lot that you have to really, get the board out and see where everything connects and decipher pretty much. And you get that with a lot of Christopher Nolan movies, but this one, especially for me. Um, so when I did the second viewing, it allowed me to piece things together a little bit more. I took everything that I was able to grasp and take in from the first one, and then I added everything that I was able to get in the second one, and it gave me a pretty good and clear understanding of the story that he was trying to tell, of what happened, the way everything was going on. So, if you don't understand movie, you don't understand what's happening, it makes it very hard to enjoy it. So once I had that understanding of what happens and what is going on, I was able to appreciate everything else about the movie, the directing, the acting performances, all of that uh started to shine a little bit more once I got the story down. And it took two viewings to fully get the story down.
Yeah, I feel like he's that director that like you have to get a second viewing, probably more than almost any other director, right? Like
Yeah.
realistically, because his movies consistently, there's so many layered things to the storyline that you miss a lot of it. And we've talked about it before where he has some movies that it's like it feels almost like homework a little bit, where like I'm just trying to keep pace with what's going on in the story, that I lose a lot of what's happening in the acting and the little tiny things. So it requires for me to have to go back and do it. Tenet was one of those ones that I need to go back and give it a second viewing. I haven't done it yet. That's why I can't fairly assess Tenet. I just know that was the one that I struggled with the most on the initial first viewing.
And it was the same for me. I'm a
Hmm.
huge Nolan fan. I watched that one. I was like, holy crap! I need to like stand back
Yeah.
and just try to decipher everything that's happening and just kind of put my thoughts together before I went in for a second viewing.
I'm gonna go with The Exorcist. Because the first time I watched that movie, it was like mayhem. It was just it was a sleepover. We were young girls. I was horrified. I was dry heaving. It was so ridiculously scary. I was traumatized for 6 months. Had to sleep with my light on. Like that's just a movie I could not appreciate, and I couldn't appreciate it until I watched it probably this year. I loved it. I think I thought it was like amazing, like so well done, but I didn't really appreciate it for all that it is until I watched it this year because I was able to finally put the horror aspect and the traumatic events that I suffered behind me and watch it more. There's not too much of a story in it, but I guess because I'm a parent now, I was really able to connect more with like the mother in it, her acting in it, and how just her trying everything she can and not giving up on her daughter. I I needed that watch now to really connect with the movie more instead of just looking at it like the most horrifying, brilliantly horrifying movie I've ever seen. It's not just an experience; it actually is a film. So yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect example of the changing of the point of views, right? Because when
Hmm.
you watch it as a kid, you're seeing it from the horror element of almost being her and being possessed or being in the room with her. But the movie's really not it's that, but the movie's about the mom's struggle with trying to
Hmm.
find an answer for her daughter. That's why when you see
Hmm.
certain scenes where she's going to the priest and she's like begging for help and she's going to the medical practitioner and she's like arguing with them, it's about a mother's struggle to save her daughter when she feels helpless. That's what the movie is,
Yes,
so
it's
you
the
only get
mother's
that if you
struggle.
know.
It's I know the mother's struggle, the priest's struggle. Like, but when I thought about it, all I could think about was the imagery, and which is incredible. But and then now it's more you can appreciate it more now in this like digital effects time and go looking at how the practical effects and the makeup was so amazing. The makeup so amazing in that movie that going back and watching it now in this day and age, it makes you appreciate it more than
Mhm.
watching it like when it came out.
Mhm.
That's a that's a movie that I have to do a second viewing on.
Oof.
Oh.
I watched that movie too late. I watched that movie as an early adult, didn't watch it as a
Mm.
kid. And the movie had this huge hype on how scary it is and one of the scariest movies around, and you might not be able to sleep. And that's everything that follows this movie around. And then I saw it as a young adult, and I'm like, this is not scary at all. I'm like, and it just I couldn't get over that. I was waiting for it to get scary the whole time. Uh, so I was just
Hurt
like,
you.
oh, I was like, okay, well, I mean, like, it's a good movie. It's a well done movie. It's a well acted movie. But
Ugh.
I was just, and that's all everyone kept talking about when it comes to this movie. It's the scares. Oh my
Mm.
God, it's gonna be haunting you. And it didn't at the point that I watched it. Maybe if I
Yeah.
watched it when I was younger, it would have. So I never went back to it. And I feel like I do need to go back to now knowing that it isn't a scary movie and appreciate some of the other things that I thought were good, but that's not where my focus was when I watched it the first time.
Yeah, this
Mm.
movie's not your typical horror movie where it's like it's punching out and it's scary and it's like so if somebody was hyping it like that, that's wrong. What was scary about this movie is I mean it came around like in the 80s, right? So it was around like we were young. So if you watch as a kid, it had a way bigger impact, obviously. But it was the fact that it's built around like true events. Like that's what's so scary about the damn movie is that there's real life accounts of this stuff happening. So real horror is always scarier than fake horror, right? So when you know real thing, that's why like demon possessions, Ouija board kind of stuff is so scary because that stuff's like realistic. Like that stuff can really happen. there's a different elements. And the thing with the Exorcist is that it's preying on, it's not like you're looking at, you know, Regan and like you're seeing her and like she looks scary. Like it's not so much that, it's the realness of it. It's the mother being powerless while your daughter's overtaken that. It's the emotional horror of this movie. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I can see that. Those
Yeah,
just were not the elements that I was focused on in the
exactly.
first one.
Yep.
Because it's not just what people were saying. That came with the advertising and the
Yeah.
marketing for that movie. The
Hmm.
scariest movie of all time. You
Hmm.
will see this in your nightmares. Like that was thrown out there through the marketing, not just like the word of mouth of people. But I do understand from those other people who saw it in their earlier stages of their life where it was just like, this is scary. So I can understand that perspective. That's why I don't hold it against the movie. I just say I watched it too late to get
Yeah.
that aspect of it. But I need to watch it again to view it as a movie itself.
I went with the movie The Big Lebowski, the Coen brothers. So this is one that I had heard about when I was young, but I was a little too young. So I watched it around college time and I saw it the first time. I was like, man, this movie's rad. I freaking love it. You know, the dude abides. But then when I watched the second time, I realized the brilliance of the filmmaking of the Coen brothers, and I'm such a fan of them. But so the premise, the dude is mistaken for a mega wealth, and he's coerced into helping the rich guy free his kidnapped wife. Very simple, very easy, But you have this character that just kind of is very much who he is, and even though he's drawn and pulled into the storyline, he's such a powerful of who he is that he forces others to kind of go into his mold. But there's so many things that I didn't realize with this movie that the more I watched it, the more brilliant it is. So those funny little quirks that the directors do. So the dude, you find out that like, okay, the dude doesn't seem like he knows anything. But then even in the dialogue, he doesn't know things. So like a character will say something that he questioned, he doesn't really know what it is, but then you see him immediately use it in conversations later. The character of Maud tells him, that about coitus, and he's like, coitus, but then you use him use that word later, so you see him trying to pan off as intelligent after we just saw him struggling with what that word means with somebody else that's telling him something. So again, you just see a dude that's floating by that's using any kind of resources around him just to get by for that day. He doesn't actually have true plan. He's not really studying for anything of greatness. But when you see it in dialogue and you see little tiny moments, it's hilarious to me because it's so brilliant because you see how that's a metaphor for how he is in life versus how he is in conversation. It's just genius. It's genius filmmaking. I wanted to do The Shining as one that requires second, third, fourth viewing, but I've talked about that movie at so many lengths. I know our listeners are tired of me talking about the same movie, so that's why I went with The Big Lebowski. But damn, I love The
And
Big
I
Lebowski.
think I think it's Julianne Moore.
Julianne
Yeah,
Moore.
Julie
There you
Moore.
go.
Yeah.
Yep. Plays Mon. There you go. Julianne Moore. But it's the little things like that and her being great in it. But you even had Flea that was in it. Like, but it's the dream sequences that you see them in, that they play with the surrealism, but you see how that's tied into moments. So you see a lot of plant and payoffs with this movie, but it's the characters that just do such a great job with this and how everything's tied in together and the little tiny things and even the jokes that they set up about going to In-N-Out, and after the worst thing happens where his car gets destroyed, then they go and they get the In-N-Out burger. So it's so many layered jokes that's for the intelligent that you just have to sit back and you can catch it. Like that's the great thing about the Coen brothers a lot is like, well, here's your story, a story, and you can watch the movie, understand it, and move on with your life. But there's so many, but if you go back and you really take the time, you can catch so many other layers of jokes. And then you can go back and catch the layers of the acting and the filmmaking and the editing. And it's just like, man, this was so well crafted.
It's like that tube of toothpaste where you keep going back. There's still a little bit left, and you find a way to squeeze a little bit more
Yep.
out.
And that's the trick too, because when that toothpaste marinates for a couple of weeks, it tastes a little better than when you first bought
You
it.
know, it cleans a little bit better.
Exactly.
Um,
It's like, is it like
that's a
that?
good
Is it
test.
like that cashew nut? Not cashews, like that pistachio that you're working really hard to crack? Is that what it's like?
That's
And
the
it's
one,
like
Oh
better
yeah,
when you get it out.
Don't you hate that when you have the bag of pistachios and there's like that one that has like a slight little cut, but you can't get your fingers in there. Like you
No.
can't open them. Either you throw them away or you crack them with a hammer or something. You gotta do something to
You
get
gotta
rid of
try the
it.
teeth for a little bit, but
Yeah,
sometimes that's too much. You're like, am I gonna cut my gums like doing
that
this?
or crack a
Yeah.
crown or something.
But you know that nuts in there it's worth it because it's so
It's
being so
marinated.
protected. That's
It's a
going to be the
diamond.
best one. That's going to. Mm-hmm.
Diamonds.
For my third movie, this is a movie uh, the first time I was not a fan of. But anyway, it's called Free Fire. The concept of it is it's a warehouse gun deal gone wrong that turns into an hour plus shootout. That's it. That's all there is to it. There's really nothing else to it. So during the first viewing, I just kept wondering where it was going. It seems so bare bones, one location, minimal plot, no deep character development. All the recipe for a great movie, obviously. Um, so when I finished it, I was like, what was that? What was the point of that entire movie? There's no substance to it at all. And especially it had a good cast to it. So it was just
So
like,
that
okay.
Jose goes back to, but Exorcist, no.
No, well, here's the thing. I ended up watching it a second time because someone else was watching it and I happened to be there. So I'm like, okay, I guess we're watching this. So it was not a
Hmm,
conscious choice
fair
to
enough.
watch this. Uh yeah. So, but knowing this time around, not to really expect anything from the movie to expect that substance, I was able to enjoy it for what it was. It was just a fun shoot 'em up with good banter between the characters that lasts like 90 minutes. It's like an hour and a half movie, so it doesn't overstay its welcome. And that's all it is. There's no plot. Like literally that sentence I gave at the beginning, that's it. Gun deal gone wrong. Everyone starts shooting at each other, and the rest of the movie is just them bantering together, doing this shootout. Nothing else crazy. You get like a little twist at the end, but nothing that's unpredictable. And then I ended up being like, okay, now knowing that this is what it is and there's nothing deeper to it, I can enjoy the way these characters are going at each other and the little like comedic moments in their interactions and things like that. And the ridiculousness of the movie of this is people literally shooting at each other for like an hour. So then I was able to enjoy it. Not love it, like, oh my God, this movie's amazing. I need to recommend it to everyone. But it was like, okay, I can sit through this and laugh a little and enjoy it.
Good. I gotta check that one out. That one sounds interesting because it's like I love Reservoir Dogs, which is essentially same thing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you have one location, characters, whatever, and you have to see the build up. But so that I think I would probably maybe like a movie like that. So
Yeah.
I'm in.
So I think if you go in with the right expectations and not
Mhm.
expecting an elaborate plot or like get too deep into the background of any of the characters, it's enjoyable.
That's a skill that you have to learn as a viewer, I think, because a lot of people come in with preconceived notions, and I think it's just so much better when you can just wipe that clean and just take what the filmmaker's giving you and stop getting in your mindset. Well, we should have seen this. I wanted to see this. It's not about you. It's about what the story that the filmmaker's telling you.
I'm gonna go with a movie called I See You, and that one
Okay.
is yeah the yeah it's strange occurrences plague a small town detective and his family as he investigates the disappearance of a 12-year-old boy.
Hmm.
Um, my first watch of this movie, I okay, I liked it. I love this movie. The reason why I say it deserves a second watch is because of all the things that you missed during the first time. And there's a reason why you missed everything, so you're not supposed to know what the heck's going on until the very end. And it's one of those movies where it's like has like a kind of like a shock ending. So sometimes like revisiting it a second time is like, well, I already know the ending. Like, what's the point? But this movie, when I first watched it, I couldn't tell if it was paranormal. I couldn't tell if it was a thriller. I couldn't tell horror. I didn't know what was going on the whole time, and I loved it. There's a little found footage part in it. It's just like there's all these different perspectives from different people. And then at the end, you're like, oh my God, that's what this movie is about. That's what's happening. So then when you go back and like rewatch it, and then you see like you say, the plant and payoff and everything and all the hidden things, and you're like, and see how everything ties together in real time when you're watching it. I really enjoyed it the second time around for that reason, because I was like, oh, like I know what's happening. You don't know, but I know now. And it's like, that's why this is happening here and this is happening here. And it's like you put the puzzle together. But sometimes when you build a puzzle, you like to go and look at it after. You're like, look what I did. Look at that beautiful puzzle. It's so nice.
It's a
Even though you already
picture
put
of
the
a
pieces
it's a
together.
puzzle of a cat. Look at the cat.
No, it's just a bunch of pistachio shells. It was really hard to build, but it was worth it because
There you
Yeah.
go. They
it's
all
like,
look
look
alike.
at this.
You
Yeah.
actually recommended that movie to me last year, and I ended up watching it, and I did enjoy it.
Mhm.
I picked a movie that so this one's very different than the other two. And it's I wanted to pick something different. I wanted to give, our listeners something different here. So I went with the movie called La Ventura. It's an Italian movie. And this is one that the storyline is very simple, but it's the emotional. I completely changed my point of views of watching this. So I saw it when I was in college, like 19 years old, 18 years old, or something like that. And what it's about is that a character named Sandro takes his girlfriend and her best friend on a boat trip, like out to like the ocean, like somewhere like tropical. But when the lover goes missing, Sandro develops a romance with the best friend during the search. But the relationship is ravaged with guilt and tension. Very simple, very easy. So when I was young, I was like, oh, the girlfriend, she was kind of a little rude. So he's hooking up with this girl, the best friend is kind of better, like awesome, like get it, Sandro. Hell yeah. Like as I was watching this, but then the whole time trying to find out, well, where did the girlfriend go? Like where did this? Like so it became like a more like a thriller the way I was viewing it and like a bunch of question marks that I thought stuff was gonna get answered. Then I hadn't seen it for like 12, 13 years. When I went back and rewatched the movie, I saw it more from that friend's point of view. And I was like, man, this guy's a freaking a-hole. Like, he's treating her wrong. I started seeing the relationship in a completely different perspective. And I was completely on her side when I watched the entire movie. And it completely changed how I view that movie entirely. It wasn't so much about the rescue of anything else. It was about this woman being manipulated and emotionally tortured in a certain sense by this guy and being manipulated to the sense of where then her self-value and things are being questioned. I was just like, whoa, it almost changed genres on me when I watched it the second time. But I saw it from a very different age of my life, so that completely changed how I did it. And the great thing that I love about foreign films is because American movies, the studios are so heavily involved in movies that you as a filmmaker, you can't just put whatever you want out there, right? There has to be certain timing. There's certain things like our audiences suffer from like ADD, like we lose attention so quickly. There's certain formulas that you have to follow, and that's why when us as American, fans are sitting there watching it, we're like, hey, this isn't, this is a little slow. This is because we're so used to the formula that we watch that when movies don't do it right, that's the reason why we say the movie's wrong. The great things about foreign films, though, is that they don't follow that kind of stuff. So when they show you horror movies, as you guys have seen, they can show you really gruesome horror stuff that American movies can't do. But they can also show you really deep emotional things of relationships and thrillers and things that they can explore that American studios don't allow you to do. So that's how you're able to take into a lot of movies that you can watch one way and view it entirely different in a different way because of how deep they explore certain elements. And where you are in life can very much alter how you view these things and how you interpret what the characters are interpreting. They're not force feeding you what's going on. They're just giving you what's happening in the scene. You as a viewer make your own take on how you interpret these characters. Fascinating.
It's basically like bowling. So what they over there in the foreign like countries, they those bars are down. So
Yeah.
they're rolling
Yeah.
through. If it ends up in the gutter, ends up in the gutter.
Hmm.
What you get out of it can depend on you as a viewer. So you can either
Correct.
get everything and get a strike, or you can end up in the gutter. While
Exactly.
not all, but with many American-made movies, they put those bumpers up. They try to keep you focused, so no matter what, you're gonna get something like out of it. And then you can end up with a lot of movies that are formulaic or end up following a similar path, and you get a lot of a lot of cliches, a lot of tropes and all that, because they're purposely trying to keep it within. They don't want the possibility of that gutter ball and the failure.
I was just gonna say, like, if like American movies too, it's like they want to appeal to like such a broad, wide audience instead of being like kind of selective because they want the money, and it is so evident in some of these movies that that's what it's going for instead of like, hey, this is a passionate project from the director or the writer.
Yeah, it feels very
Moving forward
business.
from.
It feels very
Yeah, very
business with
business. Yeah.
American. But a good example
Mhm.
is Let Me In versus Let the Right One In, right? Let Me In is the
Yeah.
American version of that same movie, the Swedish movie. But the difference, though, is that in the American movie, it's more like they're telling us what's right and what's wrong and all this stuff. In the other one, a lot of things were open for interpretation. You
Mhm.
saw stuff and you saw the character struggling with morality, and you, the viewer, is struggling with morality, whether you believe that the character is right or whether you want to see them as the hero. If you want to see them as the hero, then you'll believe their choice and their morality. You cannot. And that's why what I said with the La Ventura movie was that I wanted the guy to be the hero and I wanted to see that at the time. And when it became later, I didn't. And I saw him more as the villain. And it was like interesting how that changes. So that's why I love these type of things because it plays outside and it lets me, it doesn't dumb it down and it doesn't make me feel stupid. It lets me do some of the work and put together some of the pieces, and I can have my own interpretation of how that movie is. Feels like a mutual pairing.
Mhm.
Thank you for watching another episode of Not a Strong Start. Please like, subscribe, comment, share on the YouTube channel, Not a Strong Start. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Not a Strong Start. You can listen to us anywhere you listen to your podcast. I am your host. So good I won it twice. Follow me at
Um,
King_Sangre.
I am not your host. Another. You can find me at This Is Mi Nombre on Instagram.
Another one.
So I thought he forgot to put the one in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
No,
That's
I was
better.
going more like, this
Another.
tasted
Bring me
good.
another.
Smash glass on the
Yeah.
floor. Another.
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 Like you're ordering another dilly
Yeah.
dilly. Like you're ordering another beer at the bar.
And I'm second helping of rice bags. You can follow me at Marie Plays It All on Instagram.